May. You are up, and a moment before you start. If you are unfamiliar with May, shame on you. I had the privilege of taking the control from May's leadership. She basically established the ISC2 Israeli chapter about 6-7 years ago, but who counts? 2 years ago, I took that one when she relocated to Abu Dhabi. So thanks for that one, for the hard work, but also for the hard work that you left for us to do.
I'm sorry.
It's a privilege. That's fine. Just kidding. It's actually a privilege. So I know May for most of those years. She is, again, one of those persons that if you don't know in our industry, that means that you know no one in the industry, or almost no one in the industry. Right now, she's doing way too many things in ISC. I think the most important one of them is being part of the board of ISC2. If you're not familiar, by the way, with ISC2, ISC2 is the biggest organization for certified information security experts worldwide, with about 500 million members. Only in Israel, we have somewhere between 300 to 500. And in the States, many, many more, obviously. Besides that, she's currently doing lots of other things. And she was also the writer of Safe Cyber, or Think Safe Cyber. Oh, yeah. Well, the book in English is not yet published, right?
Next month, hopefully.
Next month. Oh.
If ISC2 will let me have some time off.
Some time. So that's basically it from my side. May.
Okay, so first of all, thank you, Gidi, for inviting me. Yes, I do have control. And thank you, Benji, for this fantastic presentation. One of the things I absolutely love about GenAI specifically, about cybersecurity in general, and about GenAI specifically, is that this world is ever-changing. Now, up until a year and a half ago, when ChatGPT entered our life in a storm, cybersecurity changed, and it changed rapidly, but didn't change as rapidly as it is today. The adoption of generative AI and AI tools in general, as Benji mentioned, if about 6 months ago, I used to talk to colleagues of mine here in the UAE, in Israel, in the States, and some of them used AI, obviously. Some of them didn't. I think that if I ask now, the majority, almost everyone I know, use generative AI for something. Some people will use it to write stories with their children. I do that, by the way. That's a great way of teaching kids what's generative AI. I actually wrote a sci-fi mystery book with my son, which is actually fantastic, I have to say. He came up with the ideas, ChatGPT did the rest, DALL-E did the illustration, and it's a great book. We really enjoyed writing it and really enjoy reading it. So I think everyone uses it. People use it to plan their next vacations. People use it to help them in their day-to-day work. And I think that basically everyone is using generative AI in some way. What happened to the presentation? Why is it ugly?
Click.
No, that's a no. Okay, fine. Fine, we'll deal with it. Even if it's ugly, I don't care. Fine. So as Gidi mentioned, I've been in cybersecurity for over 20 years. I'm not big on self-presentations. If you're really interested, you can check out my LinkedIn account. You'll have the link in the last slide, and you'll have to find there. Basically, I've been doing cybersecurity for a long time. As I said, one of the things I absolutely love about it is the fact that it's ever-changing. And I think today we're very privileged to be living in a time when changes are so rapid. And talking about strategy, this is a presentation that I created today, finished creating today, because even if I would have created it 2 weeks ago when we talked about this presentation, it would have been different. Because the strategy is different, because the motivation is different, because the risks are different and the threats are different and everything is different. When I was talking to my R&D team last year about don't just use ChatGPT to check the code because it might leak, they looked at me, why? Like, why would we care? I don't think anyone today doesn't understand that side of the business. So I think we're all using generative AI. And I'm not against generative AI. I'm all for generative AI. I can tell you that this presentation was created by generative AI, and it was intended, to be honest, I also intended an avatar to present instead of me today. And I was planning on one of my other tools to create the presentation, but I didn't have time, so I had to do some of the things myself, unfortunately. So generative AI is great, but we do have a lot of challenges correlating with using generative AI. And I want to talk a little bit about the opportunities versus the risks and the strategy around it. Because when we're talking a strategy, we can't talk about what we're thinking about today. And being in cybersecurity for many years, for the majority of that time, I was a consultant, a CISO, penetration tester, things like that throughout my career. In the last few years, I've been focusing more and more on the strategic side of cybersecurity. So even those startups that we see today that are offering cybersecurity practices or solutions for AI, they have to look at the strategy all the time. They have to change it all the time. So this is something that I'm very lucky to be focused on and work on. And one of the things that I see a lot with generative AI is the fact that it empowers us. It enables us to do things that we never could have done 2 years ago. It enables us to create new content, to analyze content. I'm now working on my doctorate. I actually created a GPT for myself with my own content. No, it is not shared, though it's my content, it's just my summary, so it can be shared. But I use it to study. I use it to, I ask it questions. Wait a minute, this is what I think of doing. And I tell it, answer me like a professor doing this and that. Tackle me, is this a good approach? And he answers me, and sometimes he's really mean about it, I have to say. But it does empower us and lets us do a lot of things that we never could have done before. One of the things that I'm personally very excited about is the fact that we're doing a lot of automations. We do a lot of automations, we play around with tools, we make sure that our work is almost seamless. Things that 2 years ago would have taken a team of 5 SOC analysts can be done today with just a few chats and a few bots, and it makes things so much easier, so much more efficient, so much more accurate. And that's great. These are all great things that we can use, and I love that. But with great power comes great responsibility. And I want to talk about the risks, because it's not all good. We know that some of it is bad. And I know that hackers are using AI to generate more plausible attacks. And I'm going to leave that to Einat, because I'm sure that as a CISO, she's going to talk about the internal side of cybersecurity. I do a lot of awareness work for the last decade or so. I lead a cybersecurity group called Think Safe Cyber with almost 25,000 members. And from the majority of these years, I used to tell them, well, if you see an email from PayPal, Amazon, whatever, and has grammatical mistakes or misspells or whatever, that's not a real email. Well, right now I'm saying exactly the opposite, because ChatGPT doesn't make grammatical mistakes. And it allows attackers to use to create social engineering attacks that are so plausible, that are so good. They look fantastic. They are very hard to detect. And that's a big issue, but that's not the one that I want to talk about when we're talking about strategy. Benji mentioned classification and sensitive data, and he talked a lot about what data we share outside the organization. And I think that the majority of conversations I have around generative AI and around how to secure and what are risks are about that fact. People exposing PII or internal documents, IP, etc. People share that outside. People don't even think about the implications of doing that. And that is security awareness. And I'm sure Einat will talk about that, because at the end of the day, it's maintaining the confidentiality of the data. But for me, as a strategic consultant, as someone sitting on board of directors and advisory boards and things like that, things that I'm exposed to as, for example, as a member of the board at ISC2, not all of our employees are exposed to, not all of the other board members are exposed to at a certain point of time, definitely not our 600,000 members, associates, and candidates. So when we're talking about this, for me, that's a huge challenge because we're talking about classification internally. How are we going to make sure that all of those co-pilots, as a general name, how do I make sure that it doesn't expose people? How do I keep the right need to know? And yes, there are several startups that I know that are trying to tackle that. They are trying to look at the classification and the labeling of data and how it is exposed to other people in the organization. Because, for example, if I'm a marketing director and I'm creating the marketing campaign for my company, and suddenly I'm exposed inadvertently to data that I'm not supposed to, for example, data from the business development side, suddenly understanding that the organization is part of a big acquisition or merger project, or we're expanding to a new market. And those are things that as the marketing executive, I'm not supposed to know. So those are huge, huge things. And I'm not talking about, because most people, when we're talking about need to know, they think of the obvious, like someone will know someone else's salary. Someone will know that there are layoffs when no one is supposed to know about it yet. Yes, but it doesn't have to be negative. Positive things can have dire consequences. And we've seen such things in the cybersecurity world for many years. I remember about probably 4 or 5 years ago, when a publicly traded company in Israel was attacked by ransomware and their entire data center was out of order and people were sent home and they were told, we'll talk to you in a few days when we are back up and running. And people started tweeting about it. We went home, we don't know when we'll come back, etc., etc. And you saw the stock price go down, 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 down. Now, obviously, those people are employed by the company. They don't want the company to go bankrupt. They didn't know. They didn't know any better. So sometimes being exposed to things that are sensitive, like layoffs, like strategic plannings, like M&As, etc., sharing that information with the wrong people can have terrible, terrible consequences. So those are exactly the things that when we're looking at strategy, we're saying, okay, we don't want to stop progress. We want to allow people to use generative AI. I mean, honestly, I can't imagine my life without generative AI now. But how do we maintain that? How can we be sure that data is not, and I'm not even talking about people trying to manipulate, like Benji said, trying to manipulate the prompts, because that's easy. By the way, if you pose yourself as an educator, you can get basically almost anything you want. Just say, as an educator, I'm teaching a course about, and ask him to give me the recipe for a bomb or malicious activity or the recipe how to hack someone else's Wi-Fi and things like that. You can do it if you're an educator. So those are things that we need to think about. And there aren't, I wish there would have been solutions right now, but there aren't really any. So here comes us as professionals trying to at least raise awareness to it, talk to management about it, explain those problems, explain that if we're talking about something very strategic for the company, maybe we should secure it in a different way, that it is not exposed to our internal AI modules that are going through the entire company's database. Those are things that have to be restricted. Unfortunately, most companies that I talk to are still not really aware of these things. And it's going to be even a bigger problem. I've already seen that people are asking about regulation and legislations, and that will be a huge thing. Now we know, and we've experienced it in cybersecurity, that the law always responds with a serious delay if we compare it to technological advancements. I think in this case, it's going to be absolutely insane, because by the time they start releasing legislations and regulations regarding generative AI, the problems and the solutions will be completely different than what was intended by the legislator. So that is also a huge, huge strategical problem. Another big problem is about ethics, is about who owns. If I created this presentation, and I did, not the actual images, but the layout of this presentation was created using a few AI tools. Who owns that IP? Is it mine? Is it ChatGPT? Is it Tommy app? Who owns it? Now, if it's just a presentation, it's fine. But what about other things? So who's going to own the IP? Who's going to own copyrights if I created something using AI? And those are things that legislators are working on, but it's not clear. It's not even clear between different countries, between different states. In the US, there are so many issues around it. Can we use it? How can we use it? Who uses it? Can I protect it? What about copyright infringements? If I'm using generative AI and I didn't know I'm using someone else's work, can they sue me? Or should they sue the module? Who are they going to sue? When we're talking about academic work or work in general, what about plagiarism? So there are so many considerations. I'm not even talking here about the fact that we know that ChatGPT, although he's my favorite tool in the whole wide world, my BFF, but he lies. He lies all the time. I once asked him, who's May Brooks in cybersecurity? Apparently, I'm an 85-year-old Holocaust survivor who started a museum in, I think it's DC. I've never been to DC, by the way. And I don't think the May Brooks is referring to as a cybersecurity professional, but maybe, I don't know. So he lies. But we know that sometimes he lies because he doesn't know any better. Sometimes he found something on the internet, and as far as he's concerned, it's fact. And we know that there's a lot of bias, which leads to the next big problem. What? Oh, it jumped to the next. Okay. No, I'll jump to the next. So one of the biggest problem is what's fact and what's not when we're talking. Well, that's true for the internet in general, but specifically for AI models. As I said, they lie. There's a lot of bias. It's not, some of them are up to date, some of them are not up to date. How do we deal with that? When we're talking about strategy, as an educator and as someone who's working also for ISC2 and for other, and as an educator in general, I'm looking at kids. Kids don't even know how to differentiate between facts and fake news. No one is educating them. Adults don't know how to differentiate between facts and fake. We have no tools to do it. And only this week, I know a lot of people here are from Israel. So in the last week, there was a post going on Facebook mentioning that a young 18-year-old girl from an ultra-religious family won the mathematical, I think it was Olympics or whatever, and the media did not post it because she's ultra-religious. Well, unfortunately, it happened 2 years ago. She's a very impressive young lady. She is ultra-religious, but not from where they claim. It was heavily covered in the general media 2 years ago when she won. Someone had the incentive of republishing it now for their own objectives. And we know it's super easy to influence public opinion using social media. And today, creating content using generative AI is so easy, so easy. If 2 years ago, if someone wanted to create a website, they would have had to spend a lot of time thinking about the strategy, how to build that website, what content to put in it. Someone had to write that content to do the copy. Today, if you want to write a website, it will probably take you, at least the initial website, a few minutes. There are tools today that will generate that website. So influencing public opinion, and we're on the verge of the general election in the US, it's going to be huge. The amount of fake news, the amount of fake data, and people are completely unaware and completely unprepared to review that data and understand whether it's fact or false. So those are definitely things that as an industry, we have to be aware of. Another strategic concern that I personally have is around workforce. I mentioned before that our work is so much easier today with all those AI tools and automations. And I specifically referenced SOC analysis, which became so much easier because we can basically, I'm not going to say completely eliminate the tier 1 SOC analyst profession, but almost. But one of the things that I'm very concerned with as someone working with ISC as a professional membership association, and as someone in this industry, you can't learn to run before you learn to walk. If we eliminate our need for basic cybersecurity professionals, how will they learn? How will they become the next generation of cybersecurity leaders? So that's also a challenge. But for me personally, I look at it and I say, okay, I don't want to stop progression. I want people to use generative AI. I want them to learn how to utilize that, but I do want them to have the right frame of mind. I want them to understand basic incidents that they're probably not going to see, because the automation is going to automatically decide that's an incident. But they will have to learn about those incidents, those basic incidents, and how to analyze them, understand them, and learn from them and go to the next level. So those are things that some people are concerned and saying, oh, we won't need that profession. Or if we're taking it to the R&D world, to the developing world, well, basically, we're not going to need junior developers. AI tools generate better code than junior developers, or at least basic code. It doesn't mean that we don't need developers. We will need people to build the next generation of algorithms. We'll need people to utilize AI tools for advanced technologies. So it is a huge, huge issue regarding how we're going to develop the next generation. And I know that some organizations, some academic institutes say, do not use generative AI, it's forbidden, it's whatever. When I teach, I always tell my students, use generative AI, build it to your advantage. Use it just as I told you, I use it in my doctorate studies. I use it to train me. I use it to create new ideas, to test new ideas, to ask it questions, to get generative AI to ask me questions. I actually gave it to my daughter, my 14-year-old daughter, and gave ChatGPT a mission to create sample tests for her in mathematics, instead of me trying to come up with questions, because I don't remember anymore. I'm old. He's not old. He knows everything. So I just gave him what she needs to know and asked him, generate more questionnaires, and it did. So I say absolutely use it, utilize it, but do it in a control way. And think about the fact that we are losing skills. Yes, for me today, I don't remember the last time I actually sat down and generated content on my own. I always use AI tools to help me. I don't remember. Does this mean I can't do it? No, but I am losing a little bit of my skills. It will take me longer than it used to before I used AI, and that's fine. It's like driving an automatic car versus a manual shift. Can I drive a manual shift? Yes, I just did. I was in Europe earlier last month, actually now. I took a manual car. It took me 2 minutes. I drove it. But it took me a couple of minutes to look, wait a minute, this is manual. Okay, how do I drive it? So those are basic, let's go in muscle memory things that we might lose, especially for the younger generation. Now, move again. Let's talk about decision-making. I started this off by the fact that cybersecurity is ever-changing. Generative AI, even more so. It changes all the time. By the time I get a report about generative AI risks, it's out of date. Benji's presentation, that was absolutely fantastic. 2 days from now, will be out of date. His examples, and not because of Benji, because that's the reality. So one of the things that people always used to say is, because people are ignorant, they make the wrong decisions. Well, then came the internet, and there's no excuse. We can have any data we want at the tip of our fingers, and we still make the wrong decisions. So I think when it comes to generative AI and the speed in which it changes, we have to be very, very conscious about our decisions and about those changes. And when we're talking about strategy, I think with generative AI, the most important skill that we have to adopt is the skill of pivoting, not falling in love with our own decisions, not falling in love with our own strategy. And we see that in the startup world. We've seen it for years, and now we see it even more so. We have to be adaptive. Some people say adapt or die. I say when it comes to cybersecurity and GenAI, innovate or die. We have to be very innovative. We have to explore. We have to research. We have to understand that things are going to change all the time. I probably spent, I would say, probably about between 10 and 20 hours a week researching new threats, new technologies, playing around with ideas. Wait a minute, can I manipulate it like this? Can I manipulate it like that? Will this help me in doing something? And that's part of the strategic work that we do in ISC2 and in other organizations that I advise on. We're thinking about the strategy. And we know that every few months we'll have to review it again. So generative AI, like any other technology, is not good and it's not bad. It is what it is. It's just technology. People talk to me about security for kids and they say the internet is bad. No, the internet is not bad. The internet has wonderful things and the internet has terrible things. It's just a matter of how we use it. So for me, I think that we all, I don't think I should tell anyone here. I would imagine that everyone here already adopted generative AI to their life in some capacity. If you haven't, try it, even with your kids. Even write a bedtime story for them, or plan your next vacation, or ask it to give you great recipes based on the few things you have in your fridge right now. It will do it. It's fun. It's funny. Sometimes the recipes are absolutely terrible, so don't say I didn't warn you, but use it. I think that we should use it, but we have to remember that those are tools. And whenever we talk about cybersecurity, whenever we talk about the internet, people ask me, but why were different protocols invented without security in mind? Well, because no one thought about it. Back in the 80s, when people started creating networking protocols, no one thought about security risks. Now we do think about security risks, but again, the technology evolves so rapidly. So I want to thank you. For those of you who are CISSPs or certified in ISC2 or ISACA or other associations, note, these webinars are CPEs. So basically you're getting 2 CPEs just for listening to us. So that's great. So make sure you submit your CPEs. Don't get to the end of the year and tell me, oh man, we forgot to submit our CPEs. Help, help, help. I will help you, but please submit your CPEs. It takes minutes. And I did promise that you can connect to me on LinkedIn. So maybe this QR is legitimate and maybe it's not. There's only one way to find out. Thank you.
Are you willing to take the risk? Okay.
Depends if you know me and how well people know me.
Thanks a lot, May. So there are a few questions. So that I just saw that some of them Benji already responded via text, but Amit asks, as a CISO, how do we make management aware that GenAI related risks are business risks, not cybersecurity risks?
Oh, that's a fantastic question and one that I love. Well, I think in general, and cybersecurity in general, generative AI specifically, it's all about understanding the business. For me, when I talk to management, when I was a CISO presented to the board, or when I'm a board and being presented to by the CISO, for me, when the CISO doesn't understand the business, that's the biggest deal. So if you really want to talk to your board of directors or to upper management in a way that they'll understand, you have to understand what they care about. What are the business objectives of your specific company? Who are your competitors? What business opportunities you have? What are the business risks, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't understand the business, and unfortunately some CISOs have no idea. I ask them, what does your company do? Maybe they know like the headline, who are your main competitors? I don't know. How do you generate revenue? I don't know. That's a business question. No, it's a cybersecurity question. We cannot protect what we don't understand. So I think specifically with generative AI, the risks, as Benji also mentioned, are very different in different organizations. So you have to understand, one, what it is your company do. 2, how it uses generative AI. 3, try and analyze from a strategic point of view, what sort of risks are associated to the way your company is utilizing Gen AI. And then you can present that to the company, and don't go around saying the sky's falling, and if we'll have a data breach, the company is going to be shut down, because at the end of the day, it probably isn't going to go out of business. It will have some sort of impact, and that also depends. I think for us as security professionals, and that's part of my doctorate work, is understanding the actual business impact of cybersecurity incidents. And it's very different. Different industries react differently, different customers react differently, even different regions. If we take the same sort of company in the same industry in different regions around the world, the reaction will be very different. So we have to first and foremost understand the business, and then we can talk to management about it.
Thanks for that one. Another question by Ziv. What about ISO 40001? So 40001, if you're not unfamiliar with, is the new papers that the International Standardization Organization issued about AI management system, which is funny, ISMS, now AIMS. So obviously, that's the one. You can find a framework for managing risks and opportunities like this. So, Ziv, to answer your question, what about ISO 2001? We have nothing bad to say about it, I assume so.
I think that in general, frameworks are there to help simplify our lives. I worked according to 27001, even in organizations that were not certified, because it made my life easier to make sure that I go through all the checkpoints and make sure that I didn't forget about something specific. But with generative AI, I think it's too new. We don't really understand all the risks yet. And I think that any framework has to be very flexible in the way we implement it in our organization.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Another question by Jamie. Do you see GenAI being fully truthful 10 years or more time? Can this be achieved?
No. Is the internet completely truthful? No, I can create a website, put whatever data I want on it. There are no actual controls. Yes, today when we're talking about Wikipedia, for example, yes, there are some sort of controls in place to try and make sure that the data is accurate. Is it always accurate? Not so much. Does it involve bias? Absolutely. That's also the difference. Even if we look at, let's go 30 years back and look at encyclopedias. Obviously, encyclopedias published in different parts of the world will have their own bias. It will be less so than it is on the internet, but it still existed. So I don't think the internet can be really, really objective. And to be honest, what is objective? What is truthful? We know that history is written by the victors. So we don't know. I don't think we'll ever achieve something like saying, oh, it's on the internet, that means it's true. Maybe.
Absolutely. Okay, so 2 more questions for you. And this time I did exactly the same thing you did with your presentation. I asked ChatGPT, can you suggest a few questions to me? So here is one that is related to also to maybe to ISC2 regarding best practices and things like this. Based on your experience using AI to create presentations, what best practices can you recommend for integrating Gen AI tools securely into organizational processes?
Can I ask ChatGPT to answer?
I
have to do it myself?
That's a loop. That's a loop that will never end.
That's true. Well, I think referencing Jamie's question, you can't just count on what it says. Could I just go to Tommy app and tell it, create a presentation about Gen AI strategic risk? Yes, I could have. And would I have been able to present it? Yes. But that's not the point. It's not just blindly following whatever output you get from a generative AI tool. I think that the best way is when I create content, any sort of content, first, it's prompt building. It's being very clear about what is it you want, who's your target audience, what are the key takeaways that they have to think, that they have to take from, in this case, presentation or any content that I want to do. And review it. It's not just copy pasting. I mean, yes, I trained some of my chats to be very good, but still I do review whatever they give me. So yeah, I think that you do need to have very clear guidelines when you use it, especially if you use it for a corporation point of view. For example, if a company is now creating a GenAI for, and we'll stay with content creation. So let's say, again, social media marketing. And I'm not a social media marketer, but still, it has to be in one voice. It has to correlate with the main messages that are relevant to that organization. It cannot be different if I'm using it or not, or Benji or Gidi or Lior. It has to always be consistent with them. With, again, in my case, as a content creator, it's usually the key takeaways. But if it's for social media, call to action. What do we want people to experience when they see a post, an image, or whatever? So I think that's one thing. The other thing regards, again, those safeguards that we have to put in place, not to expose things that we do not want to expose, and make sure that it is exactly what we want. It's all about, I almost think about prompt creation as sort of an art form. It's a skill, but it's also an art form. It's thinking in a creative way and making sure that we get, and it's exactly like creating, you know what, creating any sort of content. When we created the CISP, the first thing we did for every chapter that we started writing was, okay, what are the key takeaways from this chapter? What are the key points we want to deliver? What are the deliverables? What do we want the students' sort of journey to be in this specific domain? Once you know that, you know what sort of, how to create that content and where to put it, etc. So I think it's the same.
Well, thanks for those things.